So, have you ever had this one happen to you? Empathic person that you are. You were in a narcissistic relationship, they do a bad thing, and then they do a little bit of work, go into a little bit of therapy, and they turn to you and say, please, you're such a good person. You know, I just need some of that goodness. I recognize that now. Please help me. It's just the right thing to do to help someone going through what I'm going through. And they've got you, then they kind of hook you with that because you think, well, I'm a good person. They are trying. Maybe the only right thing is to help them. And if I don't help them, this narcissist who's trying to get it right, then I'm the bad one. I know that's a sort of a kind of a convoluted way to approach this, but think about that I'm the bad one. They're asking for my help. And if I don't help, then I'm the one who's bad. And they're telling me that, like, you're a good person. A good person would help someone like me. That's the play. Have any of you fallen for that? I know I have. If you have, drop it in the comments. We're going to break this down. Before we break this down, as with all this month of September, it's a great month coming out of summer. So as a gift of going into fall, this month, you get 25% off the first month of my healing program. So if you're interested, go look at those video notes. So this is a hard video for me to fully articulate, but it came up in something I had been chatting with someone about. Now, here's the thing. Survivors are nice people. They're nice people, empathic people, agreeable people. That ended up, strangely enough, being your own undoing, right? The framing of survivors as people who are easy to be played or who are foolish, it's not right. I think in a world that's so devoid of empathy, that when people actually have it, sadly, what we do is we view them as less strong. And I think that's largely because the narcissistic folks seem to run the narrative, and we value that kind of material success rather than kindness. Another issue that makes survivorship so difficult after these relationships, or even during these relationships, is knowing the relationship between narcissism and trauma. These personalities don't come out of nowhere, and people are not born like this. Narcissism is developed and made. It's a byproduct of temperament, childhood invalidation, sometimes childhood overindulgence, disruptions in attachment, and sometimes trauma. It's not a pretty backstory. The trauma piece is what gets people stuck, especially when you know the narcissistic person's history and you know there was that traumatic history. You can see it clearly. Their behavior, their compartmentalization, their egocentricity, their impulsivity, it all makes sense in a trauma framework. But as I tell folks, the narcissistic person isn't behaving badly with everyone. For example, they can turn it on at a party or with their boss, and then they can let their rage and cruelty loose on you. And they even know to wait until they are in private to go off on you so they don't look bad to other people. So there is some self-awareness. I've worked with a lot of trauma survivors over the course of my career. And I have to say this, the vast majority of trauma survivors, the vast majority of trauma survivors do not lash out at other people. But the empathic survivors, seeing the narcissistic person had a history of trauma, they don't want to ignore that element and want to be compassionate. That's understandable. And this is where things can get really tricky. So the narcissistic person, they do something bad. Perhaps they betray you, or they cheat, they lie, they steal, they say something unforgivable. And you say, enough, no way, I am not doing this anymore. And the usual stuff, they may hoover, they may smear campaign, they may lash out, and then some time passes. And then they may actually try and do the work. Now, this may not always be genuine. Sometimes them doing the work is because they got in trouble. They lose their job, they go to jail, they lose social status, they lose money. So they want to get back to whatever normal is for them. And then what may happen is they may play one hell of a manipulative card. They not only talk about how they're doing the work and therapy, whatever, they throw in some recognition that maybe they hurt you. They talk about their own difficult past. They play on your empathy and say, "You are the only good person I know. You have always supported me when I don't deserve it. I know you are so good, and I know you care deeply. Please, I just need your help because you're that good person." Checkmate. Listen, too many survivors can't walk away from that. To see the narcissistic person pleading like that, to say the words that you as a survivor had always hoped to hear. They say, "I get it. I'm sorry for what I did. You deserve so much better." But then to also play upon something that the survivors value in themselves, right? The survivor's willingness to help and be empathic and good and kind. Most of us, upon hearing that we were the ones who got them, who understood them, who showed them the light, especially when the narcissistic person rolls up and is really distressed, crying. It's really difficult to step away from that, especially the first time. So you help. In most cases, you have walked right back into it. Maybe not even right away. In fact, in the beginning, you may feel like you were right. They're good. They get it. No more narcissism videos for me. They had to crash to finally get it. Okay. And then one day, just as you feel like, okay, I was right, they just went through trauma, I got them, and things get back on track, the red flags pop up again. But this time, instead of being mad at them, you may start getting mad at yourself. Oh my God, how could I have been so foolish? You weren't foolish. You were being empathic, and I'm never going to be willing to call that foolish. Most therapists can't really help narcissistic clients. So as a person in their lives, it isn't likely that you're going to be able to help them either. But I cannot tell you how many times that narcissistic folks get enabled because people say, "Oh, they're in family, they're in pain," or maybe they finally see it. I think they get it. Or, "Oh, I can't walk away from someone suffering." Or now that they've been through what they've been through, now they're ready to make the change. Remember my metaphor about the tiger's cage. You go back in, you have to be ready and recognize that tiger is not a kitten. And each time you go back in there and try to engage them, you may get destroyed. But some people are more worried about the regret of not going back in there and helping the narcissistic person. But be very aware of the manipulation at play. Them saying, "You're such a good person. You're so much better than me. You're the only one in the world who gets me, who can help me, who ever saw me." Let's think back to the way they behaved with you. They didn't think you were such a good person when they were invalidating you and gaslighting you and minimizing you. But you stayed the same. You haven't changed. They're just saying what they need to say to keep their supply, to not be abandoned, to maintain control. Be clear on that. So at least if you do decide to stick around and help them, and it does go south again, that at least you don't blame yourself. It's not your responsibility to help them. It's theirs. It's their responsibility to pick up the phone, find a therapist, do the work, recognize that life is not always going to go their way, and learn to regulate. That is not your job. You are not their emotional support person. And for all of us to get into check and check our own trauma-bonded patterns of wanting to rescue, and also don't fall for the enabling rhetoric about how you have to be there for them and help a person in need. Be clear on your expectations, on your narratives, on your history, because you kind of already know how this story ends. But when somebody is in front of you and the please, 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 you're the only one, you're the only one who gets me, I finally get it, I finally see it, they're saying all the right things, it's easy to get pulled in. I would expect it from many. The key is that once you get pulled in and it goes south, please don't get mad at yourself, because you were responding from a place of empathy. I refuse to ever see that as wrong. But if you can be self-compassionate when it goes south again and say, you know, I did bring empathy. I knew what I knew about narcissism, but I believed in a person, and now I can see this as a pattern. I can be kind to myself and let myself off the hook. If you can approach it with that, then you went in the tiger's cage. But at least as you step out, mauled and scratched up, you can, again, be kind to yourself and say, I honored myself and my empathy. And that, still, sadly, wasn't going to work for the narcissist. That's a them problem, not a you problem. Thanks again.